These exercises may now be expanded, and Christiana can show us some variations. Now you can see that she is doing some easy rotational movements with her pelvis, so that her knees point to the left or to the right towards the floor. This leads to muscle stretching diagonally through our body and to a rotation in the pelvis. These movements are easily assisted by our arms or our upper body. Here we have another variation of this exercise, where the upper body is even more active and thus generates a cross-coordinative effect. This cross-coordination, that is, the movement across a center line, across the longitudinal axis, is very important. This is because all those movements which go over our center line, for example when we try to turn our head to the left or the right, and which we cannot fully perform, may be the basis for pain in our back, in the neck, or even in our legs. Now Christiana will show us another variation of this exercise. The upper body is integrated as a whole via the arms or arm posture, and the exercise is thus effective in all directions. Christiana will now hold her head very intensively with her hand and move it so that the head does not move by itself. This is very important, since this way of handling our head creates new structures. Coming from the outside creates new movement structures inside our brain. If our head did these movements by itself, it could only show us these motions it already knew. By moving it with our hands, it learns new motion sequences. The upper body may then follow, and the mobility from the pelvis up to the neck area is improved. I will now ask Christiana to continue to the next exercise, which is not an easy one. She will try to show us a rotational movement of the shoulder belt across the limit plate. These rotations may be one-sided, that is, she performs the same movements with the legs and the arms across the longitudinal axis. And now, she is generating a cross-coordinative effect. That means she tries to move her knees contrawise to her upper body. A very demanding exercise for the coordination, but everyone should try to perform it. There will be some difficulties at the beginning, but in due course you will gain more and more confidence and security. So, now we actively pull our upper body with our hands to the right and to the left, based on the same principle we took advantage of when we did that with our head. From the outside, with our own hands, we will show our upper body new movement possibilities so that it gains more flexibility. She may go further. Now she changes her grip and tries to rotate the head contrawise to the shoulder axis. Once again, a cross-coordinative exercise for the brain. Such cross-coordinative exercises contribute to the integration of both brain halves, the left and right hemisphere. The left hemisphere is responsible for the movements of the right side of the body. The right hemisphere controls our left side of the body. You may notice here how large the range of variation is, and you should certainly use it. Always remember the principle. Complete freedom of configuration is obligatory. That is, the basic prerequisite for rule-based action. So the body regains all the motion opportunities it might have lost due to a reduction of work caused by our jobs. Again, we can see how marvelous this motion flows through the body. The arm and the body initiate the movement, whereas pelvis and knees are reactive, they follow the movement. Of course, this following is particularly enabled by the stool. An immobile seat would not positively support this transfer of motion, but rather inhibit it. Now Christiana adopts a more defensive, or limiting posture, so that it is more difficult for the pelvis to perform the tilting movement forward or backward. But it is very important that this tilting movement and all other movements on the stool are performed again and again in varying situations. Only such changing situations provide new motion possibilities, because through this constant variation of the basic position, we always integrate new muscles in the whole movement. This movement, too, is in accordance with the principle just mentioned. This position is easier to perform than the last one, and it enables the pelvis to activate new muscles which have not been integrated before. Something you may notice in Christiana's movements is that she always tries to let the movement flow through the whole body. She integrated the upper body in movements which were actually started from the pelvis or from the legs. When you perform these rotating movements clockwise or counterclockwise, you will notice at the beginning that you cannot reach some of the numbers on the clock face. You should not try to solve this problem by entering these corners with too much force. Rather, you should gently repeat the movement several times. You will soon notice that your pelvis obtains, as it were, more elbow room via this repeated gentle exercise. When we confront resistance with force, we will enhance it. When we move our pelvis clockwise and counterclockwise, you will notice that you have a sunny side. That means it is easier for you to perform the movements to the one side. This problem is also easily solved. Try your sunny side for a while, and then for a short while change to your dark side. It is always the not-so-good side that learns from the better side. There is no use constantly working on the bad side, which may actually just get worse, since it has not yet learnt the principles and will therefore cramp. Here too, we have an extreme forward movement of the pelvis. That means we don't even try to touch the wooden ring underneath the seat backwards, only forwards. The corresponding movements of the pelvis are balanced by counter movements of the upper body. That means we act a little against the pelvis movements, and thus achieve a smooth muscle prolongation. Here as well, it is important to continuously change positions. Christiana started with the movements on the left side of the body. Now she is touching the center line and continues to the right. It is important to introduce a certain diversity into the motions in order to train the muscle flexibility, and to get away from monotonous movements which will only cause more muscle tensions again. Here we have another rotational movement, starting in the upper body and including the pelvis. Just as here, where the pelvis is not counteracting but fixed. This leads to a ringed position, which is actually something completely natural. We experience a ringed position with every step we make, since any time we make a step forward with the left leg, we simultaneously move the right arm to the fore, and vice versa. Here, Christiana is performing a rolling movement with the pelvis towards the left or the right knee, now to the right, and now she continues to the left. That is, not just a 6-12, but carried out along the diagonal. The movement starts at the 6, continuing to the 10 when we bring the left knee forward, and to the 2 when we bring the right knee to the front. To get back again to the tilting of the seat, Christiana has no problems to touch the lower limit plate during the different exercises. Whenever you steer the seat with your hands, new structures are introduced to the pelvis from outside. Thus it will react with more and more flexibility. This is the same principle we have applied earlier to our head. Christiana, perhaps you can show us how to play a little with the tempo, or with the amplitude. Always try to vary the movements. This will enhance the body's flexibility, which is actually activated by our brain. Now Christiana is crossing the longitudinal axis, but laterally, to mobilize the lateral body musculature. A very important function, since exactly these lateral body muscles are not the stabilizing factors for the upper body anymore. This leads to an increase in the appearance of lateral spine flexion, affecting many children, teenagers, and adults. These cannot be healed, but by reactivating the lateral movement structures, they can be compensated for. Now we have the lying 8, which is started at the top left and then continued fluently. This exercise is very important because the pelvis is able to react. Finally, it is an exercise for the brain. Both hemispheres are connected, since during this exercise we cross the center line. The center line takes the course from the nose to belly button and to the floor. Here, on the Balimo, all movements are flowing through the body. Looking at the feet, you may notice that sometimes the heels are lifted. This is completely acceptable, since regarding the motion transfer, it represents the end phase of a motion which is actually initiated by the upper body. Finally, we show an equilibrium exercise. However, this cannot be performed by everyone right at the start. It requires balance. The body's center of gravity, which is found in the pelvic area, is seated on the Balimo. Now, we perform movements which actually cause even more disturbance, in order to finally reach a positive body tension, and thus enabling us to remain balanced. With this, we have reached the end of a small training session.